What can I say about my next guest? Pioneer, legend, artist. He's band with the legendary Jungle Brothers, and I want to welcome him to the library with Tim Einenkel. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So, I wanted. What's interesting is I was reading up on you, and I read about your high school, and not just that you went there. You know, the Jungle Brothers went there. Just you read it's like X-Clan's Brother Jay went there, Q-Tip went there, Ali Shaheed Muhammad went there. What was it about? What was in the water of your high school that kind of birthed these? I mean, yourself, these legends in artists.
Mike G went there. John Leguizamo went there. I think it was the location. You know, Murry Bergtraum is right near One Police Plaza, right by the Brooklyn Bridge. So it's kind of central for people coming out from the different boroughs. You know, I don't know why. I think it was also the timing, too, where hip-hop culture was at that time. It was starting to spread through records to the 5 boroughs as well. And it was having like a new birth coming. So as we were coming of age, that was just like something to do, you know? So we kind of made those relationships based on school and music.
Did the high school itself, did it kind of...
Murry Bergtraum was a high school for business.
So it wasn't really like, it wasn't fostering the arts?
No, it wasn't fostering the arts. I mean, there was a TV production class, and there were talent shows and variety shows, but it wasn't a music and art school or a performing arts school.
On a fast, in 1988, Straight Out the Jungle came out, your debut album. It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back came out. Straight Out Compton came out. The Great Adventures of Slick Rick came out. Critical Beatdown came out. EPMD Strictly Business came out. All right, so that's just the year. That's just to name few, right?
Right.
When you guys were creating your debut album, were you aware of what was happening around you in terms of what artists were about to drop new albums or debut albums, so to say? Did you, I mean, not did you care, so to say? Did you see it as maybe like a friendly competition? Was it that, were you guys that aware of what was happening around you, or how big of a year 1988 was going to be?
Yeah, because like I said, it was a coming of age year. You know, we had the first generation of pioneers that were doing all the community work, the block parties in the neighborhood, in the Bronx. And then you had I would call like the intermediate era of like the guys making the records and the music videos, like Run DMC and the Fat Boys, and UTFO, Houdini. So, and then you had the mix shows where we heard those records, and you had the boombox and the cassette where you were taping those records, and that was your zone, you know? So you stayed up to date from the mix shows on the latest records that were coming out, you know? So, like I said, in the first generation, you staying up on where the parties and the jams are in the community, but when artists started making records or becoming artists and making records, you went to the mix shows and you started getting up on those records. And those albums came out in 1988, but it was one 12-inch at a time.
All right.
So that kind of started in like 85, 86, 87, you know, so you could feel, if you was in the zone, you could feel what was going on. You had your finger on the pulse and you was hitting the composition notebook with your pen and pad, you know, writing and making, you know, music, collecting some beats and stuff like that, and just participating.
How did you know? You come from a school where you had to be different, right? You didn't follow what was happening. I think
right.
Like DMC says everyone's, you know, like Public Enemy's doing red, we're doing green type of stuff.
Right.
Who taught you, or how did you guys know that you had to be, with all this coming out, all these, you know, how did you had to be different?
Part of it comes from you just, as a writer, you have your perspective. And as a writer, that perspective is what's giving you your material. and then you start to develop and conceptualize what your songs are going to be about, what the album's going to be called, naming the group, naming yourself, and that's what kind of, it's an organic process, to become unique and come into your own, as we say.
During the recording of Straight Out of the Jungle, Q-Tip was a part of that recording because he recorded on Black is Black. I think he said it was his first time in a recording studio. What stands out to you most about those recording sessions? And if I was asked Q-Tip what he remembers most, what do you think he would say?
If you asked Q-Tip what he remembered most,
yeah, maybe what he took away.
I can tell you what I remember most, because I spent about a year and a half working on music in my living room, DJing, because I got turntables in my second year in high school before I met Mike. So I was working on what I thought was going to become a record. So I would just come home after school, backspin breaks, record and make tapes, record my rhymes onto the tapes, make pause tapes. And the first time I went in the studio where we made Straight Out the Jungle, I was able to carry on with that process, which I thought was cool because they had drum machines, they had keyboards, they had a little 4-second sampler, and all of that stuff was new to me. And I had a little Dr. Rhythm drum machine, and I had a Casio keyboard, but I wasn't working with MIDI or SMPTE or, playing well enough to go straight to tape, in a couple of takes. So I wanted to use the tools that I was more familiar with to get comfortable with making the records the way I wanted to in the studio. And they had turntables in there, which went straight into the board, into the 16-track machine. And I was able to punch in and piece together my loops that way. So most of Straight Out the Jungle was made off the turntables, which I thought was really cool because it was like, DJing.
Right.
That's the organic way. That's the way, you're basically doing the way you do it at a block party. You're doing it in the studio, only you're making your record. So that was one memorable moment that stood out to me. With regard to Black is Black, the demo that Q-Tip presented to me that we recreated in the studio, that one we did use a drum machine, but we kind of merged the two processes of like going straight to tape off the turntable and then also playing the beats live and the samples live from the drum machine, because they hadn't worked out how to do SMPTE quite yet. So, and we didn't want it to just feel like this mechanical on the grid rhythm. We wanted it to feel like live. So, I remember me and Q-Tip doing a few takes of playing the hi-hats down, and then doing a few takes of playing the drums down, punching in on that, until we had, 5 minutes worth of recorded instrumental, and then go in the booth and do the vocals over that. So again, that organic process is what was most memorable to me.
What was your initial? You talked to some people about the idea of like punching in, right? And
yeah.
I remember talking to Torre about creating an album, and he said with Premier, and he said the biggest surprise he ever had was that Premier likes to punch in. Like Premier doesn't mind punching in.
Right.
Well, for you, what was your initial thoughts about the punch in? Was it like did you be wary of it, or did you not really care? Or did you like?
The one thing I like about recording in the studio with the first album is that we had 2 mics in the vocal booth. And the process was, we used to write all our rhymes first, go over them on the phone, Mike and I, memorize them, and then go in the studio and record our vocals at the same time. And Mike always wanted to just go straight through, like, which I love, is because it's like we have a stage chemistry that was captured in that booth, where we could just look at each other and alter things as we're recording down, or know what he's gonna do next, or give give him something to vibe off of. And sometimes we would try to use that technique, but Mike would be just like, let's just go through it a few times until we get it, and that always worked. Two or three times of doing 2 verses each back to back, bragging and boasting. That was just a couple of takes live. I think towards the end of the project, we got more familiar with the punch in, like with "Girl, I House You," and we were also overdubbing the vocals. So for the chorus, "Girl, I House You," so you had to keep going back and open up another track, say the same words again because that's the hook. And so, with my verse, I think my verse was broken into like 3 parts for punching in because I was overdubbing. And it's just the way it worked out. I mean, I didn't make a hard rule about punching in or not punching in, but we come from that jam era where you jam out and you get what you get.
Like I said, Black is Black was released or created in 1988. And I think prior to the interview, I was telling you, 88, I was, whatever, 4th grader probably at the time.
Right.
What was going on in hip-hop at the time, but also what was going on in kind of American culture at the time that kind of inspired this track to be made?
Black is Black is a key track because I feel like, I know from my studies, 88 was like a transition. So you had our parents that went through the civil rights era and all of that memorabilia, psyche, way of thinking, mentality, whatever you want to call it, that was in the household with us as we were growing up. Mm-hmm. Even though this is the 70s now and the civil rights movement was kind of waning a bit. And then by the time you get to the 80s, you've got hip-hop culture for our peer group, and it just opens the door to a new landscape of creativity. Drawing from some of the records from the 60s, adding your own twist on it by looping it or taking one part of it, putting your bragging and boasting lyrics that you heard like from Run DMC type style or Cold Crush Brothers. But then there was like the subject Black is Black, which goes back to the civil rights era, and you remember certain things from when you were growing up. So you're like, hey, my rap could be about this. Where it evolved to, it moved further and further away from that. But it was nice at the time to have that as a part of it, like Melly Mel's The Message, because crews were battling for prize money or representing themselves to hold it down and have their reputation. And, they were getting more innovative with the lyrics and the routines and stuff like that. And then Melly Mel does The Message and is like, wait, he's speaking to the society about the world, what's going on. You can do a record like that, and KRS-One documented the early days of hip-hop in the record South Bronx. So it's like you can make a record that's like a documentary. So there was all these open ways of doing things. That's why it's called the Golden Era, and all those names you listed had their own take because it was a new landscape opened up. So it was like, hey, I want to build a house like this. I want it to look like a dome. Oh, I want it to look like this, like a pyramid. Oh, I want it to be a skyscraper. Everybody had their own vision.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's the role of hip hop, to be this voice that, voice for the people, or do you think people kind of put too much weight on what the responsibility of hip-hop is supposed to be? I mean, this socially conscious voice.
I think at the time, because hip-hop was just in a certain circle, in a certain community, it gave that community a voice. Not out of like, hey, you want to become a part of hip-hop? You want to be an MC? Here's the training program. You got to speak about the things that we talk about in the neighborhood. No. It was just, this is your peer group. Most of us were teenagers, so we was putting people up on what we was going through, what we were seeing, the new slang, the new clothes, or the new beats, or stories we wanted to tell. You know, a lot of hip-hop was storytelling, too.
Right.
So, but when it moved more closer, or rather when the mainstream moved closer to it, first through journalists and academics and photographers who saw the scene and saw the craft and looked at it as an art, they started wording things in a certain way that their readers and viewers and listeners could relate to, like to people who were not from the scene. And as we move into the 90s, that was kind of like the story that went along with the campaign for your album. Because now hip-hop is going national, and radio stations and video stations, they're like, what's my tip sheet? What do I say on camera or on the mic about Tupac?
Right.
He's from Descendant of the Black Panthers. He's revolutionary. He's talking about teenage pregnancy and Brenda's got a baby, you know, whereas he covered a lot of topics, but they would bring that one up because that was like in the current events.
Right.
Covered from other journalists. And I think that's what gave hip-hop that kind of stigma for a while, that, oh, you're the voice of the people, you have to speak responsibly, you know, because these other factions were listening in to learn and get something out of it, you know, because they weren't a part of it, the original community that was doing it.
And now do you think it's... I mean, what is it? What do you think what's the journalist's kind of storyline for, I guess, hip hop now? I mean, is it more about I feel like it's more like a business mindset, so to say?
Well, creatively, it's like I said, hip hop grew more branches. So there wasn't going to be one totalitarian way for all artists forever to come to just do it in that format. Obviously, we've had crunk, we've had Miami bass, we've had trap, we've had hip hop mixed with R&B, we've had funk with hip hop, we've had party records, we've had socially conscious records, we've had trap house records, you know, talking about the trap house. There's all these subcultures in different regions around the world, really, but let's just stick with America, around the country, where everybody's got a different way that they were brought up and they want to speak about that in their music. So that's the creative side of it. The business side of it is going back to the 90s when I said it started to get more mainstream attention and more corporate investment. They were just looking at the numbers and going, well, which records are selling, which message is selling the most?
Right.
And which one is the most formulaic? Because that's the one that we could put our money into and it will stay stable long enough for us to increase our profit margins. And that was gangster rap. Because they would see in these zip codes, like in the suburbs of Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, or St. Louis or Ohio, they would see, well, wait a minute, that's not the Bronx. And there's a lot of records being sold there.
Yeah.
What kind of record is it? You know? And it would usually be like gangster rap, you know, Ice Cube, you know, so then they just started to find groups that were making those kind of records, and that's how you got a whole lot of gangster rap. We went through a whole gangster rap era, you know, until people started to go in different direction. So that's my answer for the creative side and for the business side.
I want to turn to obviously you guys done so much in your careers, and you've also worked with so many engineers, producers. I think one engineer / producer that really stands out to me is Bob Power.
Right.
You talk to anybody about him, it's like, you know, it's just an amazing experience in terms of working with him.
Yeah.
What do you remember about working with Bob on your third album?
I'm a big health guy right now, and the one thing that I remember about Bob Sometimes I think about him when I'm doing my 10-kilometer run in the morning. He was a cyclist. He would come to the studio with his bike. His fitness levels were high. His tolerance was high. His aesthetic was high. And he knew how to merge aesthetics from music that was outside of hip-hop in an organic way with hip-hop. So he really had like an ear for those hybrid things. But his him personally, sometimes I would see his personal lifestyle, you know, and I go, oh, this guy's interesting. He's not like a rock and roll engineer or somebody just trying to figure it out, you know. He's got a drill. He's got a flow, you know, and yeah, that was one. I never said that to him, but that was one of the things that would be on my mind when we sitting at the boards together working on music. It's like, you come from a place that developed, and you've developed into bar powers, and I can see that. That's what I'm looking at. What's your life like? Where did you come from? You know what I mean? Because he was, to put it in business, if you want to call it that, he was a great asset to hip hop culture. You know, because a lot of engineers, you'd be in the studio, they wasn't getting it. They didn't understand why a hip hop record could just be on 2 channels with vocals next to it. You know, I had some hip hop engineers tell me that. You know, Brand Nubians, they just got like the beat on one track and a bass line, and then they go in the booth and they do their vocals, and that's the record. You know, even when Run DMC, made Suck MCs, you know, Russell laid down the drum machine track. Run DMC did the vocals on top, as I understand. And then the engineer was like, great, we've tracked the drums and the vocals. Tomorrow we're going to get the bass player in, the guitar and horns. And Russell was like, no, that's it. That's the record. You know what I mean?
Keep it simple.
And it's like, you don't want that kind of vibe in the studio where an engineer doesn't get it. And they're like looking at you the way IBM was looking at Bill Gates, like, what?
Right.
Micros, PCs, why are people going to use, you know, you want the bar power vibe. Like, no, I get it. I get what you guys are doing. I know how to make it reach a certain aesthetic. Hey, maybe do a little bit of this. Just give me a little bit more of that. Mm-hmm. You know, not change it, but just enhance it.
When you think about Bob Powers, but then you also think about, you know, the Jungle Brothers and a lot of the DMC and Public Enemy, and what really stands out is that you've all kind of grown up on a diverse, you know, an array of music genres.
That was New York at the time. This is what I explain to people when I travel a lot. And I always get the question, hey, where are you from? Because I make friends with people that don't know my group, or I'm in a group. Hey, where are you from? Hey, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from New York. And then they go, oh, New York. But they think of the new New York. And I'm like, no, I'm from the old New York. Because as soon as they go, oh, New York, they go, oh, yeah, I've got friends in Williamsburg.
Oh, God, yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, Airbnb, hipsters, right, New York. Okay, that's the new New York. The old New York that I'm talking about is the New York that was Gotham City.
Right.
You know? So what I found out is that there was a lot of experimentation with music and an eclectic scene of music, because all these venues where there was clubs and nightlife, the rent was cheap because the city was broke. So if you owned a building and somebody said, hey, I want to make a club here and do what I want to do, they was like, sure, just give me a cut. So there was a lot of experimentation. So you'd have one club that opened up with a rock band playing, and then after the band was done later in the night, a DJ would come on and play disco, you know, or you'd have like a punk rock night at a club around the corner from NYU, and then Bambaataa would come and DJ as a part of that, you know. So then you had like Brian Eno, David Bowie, Blondie, Grandmaster Flash, Madonna, Beastie Boys, Rocksteady Crew. You see where I'm going with this? It's like people from different worlds coming together for this New York City nightlife that we all lived for, and it was a lot going on, and there was a lot of access to, you know, the Roxy's, Studio 54, the Rooftop, which was up in the Bronx, Latin Quarters, to name a few clubs. You know, the city was full of nightlife and full of people from Europe coming over. We had New Wave come over. You know, we had a very eclectic mix of music. You know, Malcolm McLaren. It was an eclectic mix of music. So at that time, it was really about rhythms. Herc was digging through the crates, finding breaks. He didn't really care if it was funk, soul, jazz. It was about the breaks, because that was the part that people reacted to, and that was an eclectic mix of music within itself, you know, but it was about the jam. You know, New York City was about the jam, the Def Jam.
How do you think, how prevalent is that, having that array of musical influences, or just hearing that sound, important for just any artist and more important for artists with career longevity? Because I feel like today, and I sometimes hope it's not because I'm getting older, but like, you know, I hear a beat and then the DJ changes the beats and quote, but I don't hear it. But everyone else, the younger crowd, goes crazy as if, you know, something happened that I totally missed. But then I talk to people like, no, don't worry. You didn't miss anything.
Yeah. Well, here's what happened. Here's the evolution. I remember back in the day going and seeing bands in the park. My aunt's boyfriend was in a band that would have been like Earth, Wind & Fire, or Kool and the Gang. They started in the park. Mm-hmm. Then you transition from going to see bands in the park, which is 10 people on, you know, in the band, 3 to 10 people, to just one DJ with a whole lot of speakers. And then you got the boombox, which is an extension of that. And so people have more time and more rhythms from the band to the DJ, and from the boombox with the mixtapes. There was more time to get steeped into it, deep into it, and things lasted longer. Then the boombox became illegal, so you had the Walkman. So now you can't really spread what you're hearing. It's more about, and it's not about the group anymore. It's about the individual, what they're hearing. And then the Walkman went away, and the CD came. So then you're back. Now now everybody's driving cars and blasting music out the car, and then you get your cue from that. But it's still about the individual. And then that becomes illegal to play. You play your music loud, and then here comes the iPod. So you're back in your ear again. And then here comes iTunes, and it's like you don't even listen to a whole album.
Right.
You just listen to one song. And that's kind of like where we're, and then the laptops come out for the studio stuff, and it's like it's too expensive to go in the studio. It's too expensive to buy a drum machine, and you could do more with a laptop. So again, it's the individual, and you're not moving as much. So if we go back to the jam in the park, and the jam with the band, and the jam in the park with the DJ, and then we move into the club, that's still large groups of people catching on to getting their cues from other people and dancing and moving, and you know what I mean, and making a scene. But the more you get into the technology part of it, where it's just for the individual, the less more people are involved. And because you're not moving as much, you do notice these little fine changes, these little different bleeps from one trap record to the next, or from one deep house record to the next, you know? But for us, we absorbed so much more rhythmically because we were out and about, carrying the radio. We were out and about seeing live music. We were out and about in front of a big sound system where they playing Carlos Santana, and then Apache, and then a Kool and the Gang break, and then a Funkadelic break, you know, like all that variety, you know, all that diversity, you know. So I think things just got narrowed down. And for the ears that were born into that more narrowed down version of the experience, of course, one bleep
They hear it.
different,
Yeah.
you're going to hear it. It's like going from a crowded space, public space, to being put in solitary confinement. And it's like, oh, usually I hear doop, and now it's doop, see? You know, it's like, because that's all you could hear. And you could pick that out, you know?
Yeah, I remember talking to a guy I went to high school with, but ended up being a producer and teaches music down in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And he was saying his group of kids who are like high school, maybe
Yeah.
college, he plays them a Premier beat,
Yeah.
he plays them a Pete Rock beat,
Yeah.
and they don't hear it.
Yeah.
They don't hear the difference.
Yeah.
And he kind of, that's like, he didn't realize that would have to be part of his class, is kind of explaining
Yeah.
the difference between these two producers or their sound, so to say.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, for me, I mean, you hear Pete Rock beat or you hear Premier beat, you know the beats offhand, right? I mean, you know.
Yeah, because we got familiar with the process.
Right.
You know, we heard that it was more loops. And then when it got to Premier and Pete Rock, it was more chopped.
Right.
And then we knew some of the records they were chopping, so we knew how they were treating them differently.
Right.
But they don't have that context, you know? They didn't get the loops. They didn't get the records that we got from the loops, which came from the DJs at the block party, which came from the bands that were jamming out in the park. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They didn't get it's just they've been cut off. They just grew up with the internet, and they grew up with the technology of the software. You know,
right.
The auto-tune, Fruity Loops versus Logic, you know. And they also play off of more of melody.
Right.
These music, you know, because of auto-tunes, everybody can sing. So their songs are more melodic. And it's more about the lifestyle in the moment.
All right. I want to turn to, you guys are the founding members of Native Tongues.
Right.
Just what was the original purpose of the supergroup, and what impact did you want it to have on the culture?
It was a collective. The early crews had collectives. That's what we learned, you know? You have a collective, you go out and you shut it down, you know? But our collective came about organically, because Jungle Brothers were already doing their thing. Then we featured Q-Tip on the first album. Then we went and met De La Soul in Boston, and I introduced him to Q-Tip, and it was at that point, it was like a social thing. We all got along. Then De La invited us to do Buddy, and people started associating us already because we were building a scene from DJing at different parties, Milky Way, Payday. And but then when we made that record in the video, more people got exposure to the fact that we were all associated together as a collective. And then we named it Native Tongues. Q-Tip and I named it Native Tongues. So, because he was like, we need a name for the collective. And he was like, Native, and I was like, Tongue, because we're speaking our own language.
Right.
So that solidified that collective. It was a loose collective. I want to say it's a loose collective. It was organic, the way it came together. You know, but the ball was rolling already for Jungle Brothers and De La, and Q-Tip was coming up with Tribe Called Quest, not too far behind. So it happened out of just socializing and hanging out, right, and DJing, which is cool. That's a community. Right. That's how you make a collective. Organic. It wasn't a super group like, say, what Chuck D and Be Real are doing.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, hey, you know us for what we do in our groups. Now we're going to do something else like that, but together. You know, it was more like we were sharing beats together. We was digging each other's music. We were still creating the new stuff for ourselves and with each other, you know.
There's a reunion show coming up. I think in D.C., correct?
18th of July. It's a Native Tongue festival.
Why the festival? I guess now, what can we expect from it?
Well, it's more like a tribute festival, so it's like whoever's down to come and participate doesn't have to be whole groups, as I'm understanding it. So there's Mace DJing, there's the Bush Babies, Dresden Black Sheep, Jungle Brothers, original Jungle Brothers, whole group will be there. Red Alert, and loads of other names. So, yeah, I think it's like a one-off festival thing in D.C. I think it's good. It's a good start.
Start of hopefully many, or many shows together. Many.
I like the festival model. I mean, we play a lot of festivals. I remember when festivals were jams in America and free parties in England, and then they became shows in America and raves in England. Then they became concerts in America, and now we have EDM festivals. It's like we caught up late. But yeah, we've been doing festivals in Europe since '88, and it's a different vibe from concert because it's outdoors. Mm-hmm. There's more stages. There's like 3 or 4 stages. You get a lot. It feels like a jam.
Right.
It feels like the jam like back in the day. And I think that's a good condition to have to bring groups together and just go, let's just rock out. I think when it gets in concert mode, it's like, I mean, festivals are business too, but when it's in concert mode, it's like even more corporate. Venues are owned nationally across. There's politics you have to deal with. Ticket sales, money,
right.
All the stuff that the jam doesn't have anything to do with. The jam is more like for the community. Showing up, we're setting up a sound system. Who's coming? You know what I mean?
Is the live, obviously the live show has, for artists now, has kind of become more important because they have to sell their merch there. Mm-hmm. Versus, CD album sales, now it's streaming sales, and obviously we know the numbers behind streams doesn't give you crap. In terms of, how has that affected you at all? I mean, in terms of like the importance of the live show, or do you still approach it the same way that you've always approached your live shows?
Yeah, we've always been a predominantly live band, like from day one, because we grew up seeing the jam. We grew up seeing the block party. We rehearsed to come up with routines before we went in the studio, and then you record them, you put them out, and then when you perform them live, it's just like the way you rehearsed it, and we started off on an independent label, so they didn't have a big machine behind them to sell a gazillion records and pay us big royalties from sales. We always got our money from live. Everybody's like, all the money is in live now. It's like, it was always all in live all the time, because most artists, there's very few artists that were actually making profit off of the records that the record companies were putting out. Come on, they're getting 10% royalties, 16% royalties off of $10. It's like, here, I'm going to make 10 and give you $1. Come on, TLC. Come on,
yeah,
that's an extreme case. So it was always all about the live, and now that record sales are down, it's the new buzz story. Oh, live is where everything's at. And, it's more driven towards that. And then you have companies that set up and you sign to those live companies, and they're your record company.
Right.
It just changed the business model. So then it became more important to have merch. 360. Yeah, and then the 360 deals. It was like, let's change the business model to capture more of our profits from live. Endorsement deals, merch deals, sponsorship deals, all of those things that athletes used to get, or MC Hammer used to get backlash from hip hop for getting, is built in now, We're going to get, we're going to get this sneaker company to sponsor the tour. They're going to throw in $100,000. We're going to get this energy drink to sponsor the tour. They're going to throw in $100,000. We're going to get, this new video game, Fortnite's going to throw in X amount of money so they can have the rights to put it up on their video game in VR world,
right.
Augmented reality world. So out the gate with those 360 deals, those companies are going to all those vendors and all those, for endorsement and sponsorship, And so, it just becomes the big thing of the town, But ain't nothing changed. It's always been do the live thing.
I want to turn to your new single, Yeah. You listen to it. It's a great track. Commentary on new artists, ghostwriting. What's kind of your main issue or with ghostwriting? Have you? I mean, because there's obviously two.
I don't have an issue, but we're supposed to have an issue
right.
because of the era we come from. But I'm open-minded to every era. I look at it across 40 years of hip-hop across the board. From party records, the first 10 years, to street records, the second 10 years, to strip club records, the third 10 years, to trap house records, the past 10 years. That's 40 years. Everybody's going to do things a different way. The first 10 years was like, who did you come up through to get on the mic?
Right.
Do you know Herc? Who put you on? The second 10 years was on the street mafioso stuff. So it was like, I don't know about that. But that was the move. It was a change. The third 10 years was, we got to make records for the club. Laffy Taffy. Strip club. That's where people shifted. So it was like, and then these 10 years with the trap, you got producers, you got ghostwriters. I mean, you've had ghostwriters. I mean, Kaz wrote Rapper's Delight. He just didn't get the credit for it, And he wrote a lot of the songs and a lot of the routines for his group. So in effect, he was a ghostwriter, a respectful ghostwriter, a respected ghostwriter, before you called it that.
Right. Skills at all.
But what I like as an author is making these associations. So I associated in my part of the record, what I'm saying, ghostwriter in your bedroom, putting words in your mouth. I'm digging up your grave, earworms coming out. Because in Germany they call melodies earworms, or catchy records earworms.
Right.
They get stuck in your ear. And I like the concept of a ghostwriter, and I was likening it to like mystery or ghost stories. And I was like, that's interesting. So there's a person in the room that you don't see the name, he's anonymous or she's anonymous, who's telling the artist what to say. What would that be like in a film? Like, like a ghost that comes in the room and like sits down with a Ouija board and is like, give me that hit record. I was playing off of that, the way Vincent Price was set into Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Right.
And then Mike went more in MC mode and was like expressing where has he been all these years? Is he writing? Is he over enlightened? Is he trying to make sense of the excitement? Is he trying to make it right or righteous? I took a break to get it right. Some of these cats really try to dim my light. All I wanted to spread love on the mic. And then he goes into the ghostwrite line. And it's just like, look, I don't want to be involved in that mess, the controversy and all of that. I just came in to spread love and put it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The way this thing was built. So we're supposed to hate on ghostwriting because of the era we come from, but we just see it for what it is.
Why? It's been, what's your first track in 10 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the new single. Yeah.
What was the Do you remember the first, like, do you remember when you first started to feel like that first line that you wrote that said to you, all right, we got something here, we got to release something now?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember where you were, what you actually wrote? That might not be on the song, it might be on the album itself, but do you kind of remember that moment?
For me, it was Mike's verse in that song, yeah. Because I had a different creative process. I was writing all the hooks first and producing the music and structuring it. And Mike would come to the studio and just hear like the sketch structure with the hook and then go in another room and write. And when he recorded that verse, that was one of the first songs he recorded. It was like, whoa, this album's going somewhere already. You know, that says it all right there. You know, it's like, you can't have an album without saying that.
Right.
His verse, and yeah. You know, and my verses came after the fact. I mean, I had some sketch verses in the beginning, just sparring, you know, just to spark stuff, you know. But Mike's verse gave that song the direction it needed, and his subsequent verses too and other songs gave those songs the direction they needed. So, you know, it's we don't preach, we don't hate.
Right.
And so that one line, all I want is to spread love on the mic. Full stop.
Done.
That's it. You can't say no more than that.
Right. There's like no argument.
This is my intention.
Right.
So when I step in the room and we start doing interviews and you start asking me, well, what do you think about hip hop today? And there's this argument about old heads versus the new. And then it's like, listen. I'm looking at this whole thing, and this is what I'm bringing to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we not old school bitter. We not hating. Got love for the whole 40 years, and we got understanding for it.
Are you still, how has the creative process changed? Are you, I mean, with this album, are you guys both in studio together writing? I mean, has it always been the case? I mean, obviously now we're at a time where, you know, I do a verse, email it to you, or FT.
Again, bless Mike. He was like, I want to be in the same room. And I feel him on that. You know, it's like, we can't do the email thing. We got to be in the same room. And I work with a lot of artists and producers and collaborate that way. But I make sure it's organic. I don't just get a cold beat, go in my own zone. No, we're going to at least talk on the phone. I'm going to do some homework on your project. I'm going to talk to you, maybe even have a coffee, hang out, get a vibe. And then I'll go try something on my own and send it to you. 9 times out of 10, when we do the final takes, we're going to meet together in the same room. Right. So it might not start off with everything is all in the same room. So I know how to do it that way. I've adapted that to that. But yeah, we were together in the same room. I mean, I like I said, I did a lot of structuring and changing my verses and moving things, his verses around just to see the feel. But when he steps in the room, it's like you get that updated sketch, and then we can rework that together. So it's better. It's still better to be in the same room, I think,
right.
Because things spark on the spot. You know, you can do coloring by the numbers, throw it up on the grid, and make it like, okay, all the parts that make up the body of a song are there, so it's a song. No, there's the vibe too.
And is that? Imagine there's, you know, you write a game plan, and something might come up that's not even on the game plan. It just kind of pops up because you're in the same room together. Yeah,
I mean, dude, like a year and a half of this project was 2 years. A year and a half of it was structure. And then I took like 2 months off to do some personal training to get my fitness levels up. And 6 or 7 verses each record. In the last month, I got to like the 7th take. And I just grabbed the mic and just raw. And that's what's on the album. You know, all that vibe that was pent up inside, it just came out. Raw. You know, and that was from being in the room with Mike, vibing with him whenever he came in, going home and listening down, typing his lyrics out and reading them, getting these, and then my personal training, because, you know, the fitness levels, the running, I do a lot of boot camp and boxing, and it just gets your wind right. You know, you just feel stronger, you know, and when you grab the mic, you got more power. So at that point, you're going beyond structure and coloring by the numbers, and you put more energy and pulse into the music, and that's what creates the vibe.
Are you, when you're fitness, are you thinking about the music at all? Or you try to clear that out of your mind as well? No. It's completely connecting with your body. You can't think about, I overthink sometimes. And my cure for that is boot camp. It's our training on the sand, and it challenges you so much. You have to be more conscious of your body than your creative ideas. That's my final question. You know, so much of people's, or groups, artists' legacies, I think, are defined by other people. But if you were to kind of define your legacy, or the Jungle Brothers' legacy, what would it be?
We remained true. We remained authentic to the early days of what I said, the band, the DJ, sound system, the jam. Essentially, we could jam out with no records. We could jam out the lyrics we have memorized to all these albums to a brand new mix of beats. Sometimes we do that live. And people just go, wow, the energy. Oh, man, the live show was incredible. Like they didn't know that was going to come out the box because they've seen so many shows where the energy's not that high. And it's all based on the hit records.
Right.
You know, and some of them are being lip synced and some of them are being processed with the auto tunes, which is a sound, it's a thing, but it's based on a production and a presentation, you know, whereas we come from the ethics of like the DJ who's got to rock the crowd and the band that's got to command their instrument. That's what makes the Jungle Brother legacy. Other people see it as we're the first ones out the gate on the native tongue era, the golden era. And that is a part of our legacy too. But when you strip that away and you get to the core, it's what we do live. The chemistry we have on stage, the energy we put into the music, whether you know it or not. That creates the vibe in the room.
Makes me want to see a live show, which I have not had a chance to see, but I hopefully will once my kids let me sleep.
No sleep till Brooklyn.
No. Bam, Jungle Brothers, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for being in the library with Tim Einenkel. Thank you.
New album, Keep It Jungle. Always. Nice. Thanks for having us. Hope to be back again soon.